Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Shall we start on time at 9 o'clock? Indeed, it just ticked over to 9 o'clock as I spoke. So we've got a packed program here today. So I might as well start right now, so that if we've got some questions or whatever, we can put them later on in the hour and a half. Then we'll be followed by another hour and a half on smart data models. So we're talking about transferring data here, and the important point is that you need to transfer your data securely, and you need to be able to understand your data. And this is what this part's about, is a format which means that your data interchange is going to be understandable. So this is a short introduction to Json LD and NGSI LD. The LD in NGSI LD comes from Json LD, and why organizations need linked data solutions. I'm then going to follow this with some more stuff on NGSI itself. This is who we expect to be here at the moment. So you should actually already understand things like REST and JSON and what have you, and have a good understanding of NGSI and NGSI LD, at least the background. If you haven't, then I would heartily recommend that you go through some of our existing videos. We've been creating videos on NGSI v2 for the last 2 years to understand what the whole point of this. Obviously, no one's going to be an expert in literally everything on this screen, but you should know some of it. Now, the part of this whole session is to try and develop people as the Fireware experts, and I believe that there are already about half a dozen, maybe. I thought I saw somewhere between 10 and half a dozen Fireware experts in the audience. So if you're in the audience and you're already a Fireware expert, could you put your hands up? Because you can do some we can do some interactions here, right? And then the other people can identify you and say, yes, these guys are worthwhile talking about, to find out what actually is meant by a Fireware expert. What do they actually need to know? Because I'm going to assume that you've got a reasonable level and you're willing to study to take the examination. And these guys will be able to tell you, yes, the examination is this easy or this hard, or you need to learn more about this or whatever. So, Fireware in a nutshell, and this is the one slide thing which I do, which makes sure that people understand it before they fall asleep. Fireware in a nutshell is just these 5-6 points. It's REST done right. It's a proper REST API which is based on the principles from Fielding's thesis. It's got just slash entities, and it uses the actual HTTP verbs to tell you, yes, I want to put something, I want to patch something, I want to get something. It's rather intuitive if you know how to design an API. And it tends to return purely status codes. So if you post something to the server, it'll probably return 204 if you're lucky. And they say 204, yeah, success, no content. So you need to use the status codes to work out, has something gone wrong? Have I got partial content? Have I got 206? Or have I 404 not found? Whatever. Now, it's based on JSON. NGSI v2 with a JSON API, but Json LD introduces a bit more structure to the payloads and some additional rules, which we will go into. You have got registrations to augment context, so I'm able to take information from elsewhere. And I can also publish some subscribe mechanisms for asynchronous processing, so that if something happens, like, I don't know, my speed goes over 90 miles an hour or whatever, then I can actually go off and warn the authorities or whatever. So that is what you would do in 3 minutes to say what is Fireware. Around the core context, which is the section in the middle, there are a multitude of additional components which can lock into this API, because it's well defined. So you've got the possibility to grab items like and connecting to IoT or connection to robots, and you know they will work with the context broker. The section on the right, which has got I've got that in red, has got the authentication and working out who you are and what have you, as well as the business framework saying, are you allowed to take this, which of course is also to do with this data sharing concept. So there's already a large chunk of the Fireware catalog which is of interest to this project. So this is a problem I pose to everybody, and you should pose to yourself. NGSI v2 already exists, so what's the point in going for NGSI LD? NGSI v2 already offers no vendor lock-in because you have a well-defined API which goes between the various different layers, as I showed in the previous slide. You already have this interoperability layer so that you can do things like you can do a post and it will somehow go out to a device somewhere. You already have the flexible architectures because there are Powered by Fireware solutions which are NGSI v2 based. All these things are NGSI v2 based. What's the point of changing your API to add these 2 extra letters on to try and do something else? Well, that's what this is. Why bother with LD? And this is the problem it solves. The problem is that when you are sharing data between organizations, you have got no control over that other organization. Now, Conway's law states that basically I'm going to end up pushing out my data in a format which mimics my organization structure. If I am a Spanish company, I'm more likely to want to use attributes in Spanish. I will call my temperature region temperatura. And if I'm English, I'm more likely to want to use that in English. I might have a different concept as to what I mean by name. Does it mean a login name? Does it mean a username? Or does it mean the actual legal name of the person in use? You need to be able to communicate this information along with your structures without mucking around with the data they've got on their side, basically. So there needs to be an additional context file which says, okay, what I really mean by this is that. 2 examples. There are borders all over the place if you're talking about data exchange. Taking the obvious one on the right, cross-border tourism. If you are in the south of France, in Menton, right next door, you've got the Italians. Are the Italians using the same system as you are? Do you want to get hold of traffic data from Italy if you're in France to find out whether there's problems going on there? Probably. Are they going to be using the same system as your own local authority? Probably not. Are they speaking a different language? Probably. This is where you want to be able to promote standardizations in data models such that you can actually say, okay, typically a system for, I don't know, traffic is likely to have the following attributes. And these following attributes are likely to have this particular meaning. And that means that if the Italians and the French are able to come to an agreement as to what the long names, URLs of well-defined attributes are, then they're able to say, okay, I can exchange the data from one side to another. Another example, which is obviously not as clear that there's a barrier, but it happens very frequently, is local authorities. You can have local authorities where the border between 2 legislative areas is not obvious, but you could have a car park just outside of my local authority. And I don't know whether it's empty or full, unless I can actually get hold of that information to find out, okay, I want to get hold of your data, find out, are you full? And I need to be able to communicate based on the data that you hold in the format that you hold. And that's where JSON LD comes in. JSON LD is basically just JSON with an extra at context. If you look at the screen, you can find this very simple example. And this at context file is defining what these attributes actually mean. There's a structure. You can go to the Json LD website to find out what information you can put in. You can put in things like, this is the name of somebody in Spanish. This is the name of somebody in French. You can put things in like this enumeration means that, and so on and so forth. And it means that you have what looks like a structure which is very similar to JSON, with this funny little at context line above it. Indeed, it can be a linked header in Ngsi LD, and that's it. That is just saying that we are well defining various different things, because this is my problem. I got this on my LinkedIn feed recently. I have a colleague called Harpreet Singh, and he works with blockchain. And the thing is that there are other Harpreet Singhs around, and they also work in blockchain. And you can see that this means that you can't individually point out which Harpreet Singh we're talking about just by giving them just by putting a name on screen. You need to be able to give everybody every information line of information data you're pushing around a proper URL to be able to say, yeah, this is the item I am talking about. Now, I might call him Har, but you might call him Mr. Singh. It doesn't matter. We have got this defined URL to say, this is the guy we're talking about. This is the attribute we're talking about. This is what we're actually talking about. And that is fundamental to linked data, because you have got control of their data. They need to publish this mapping to be able to tell you, yes, we're talking about Harpreet. Linked data, NGSI v2 to NGSI LD. Again, please read the documentation. It looks very similar to that JSON LD structure. Again, you have your ID. You don't need the @ID for LD, because it's assumed it's mapped automatically. ID and type as you get for NGSI v2. And then you have a series of properties or relationships. The properties, the types of sub-attributes must be either property, geoproperty or language property, or relationship. You cannot have a type called number anymore. Any of the JSON native types like dates or like I don't know, floats or strings are available. You can also put in any GeoJSON type, which will come into later, saying what you are. And then you've got this funny thing at the top, which is saying the at context. The at context has got two parts. It's got whatever you call your attributes, and then you've got the definition of the API itself, which is the one coming direct from Etsy. And this is defining the overall payload. For those of you who are familiar with NGSI v2, it's not particularly difficult. It's not very different. All you need to do is to use a different endpoint. The context type is now LD plus JSON, which is the standard MIME type for linked data. And then your IDs will be URNs. It's mandatory they are URNs. They're already supposed to be URNs in v2, but mandatory. And you can see everything's property or geoproperty. That's it. That's all you've got. What does this actually give you? Well, v2 had a metadata element, which would hold things like the unit code or the time observed or whatever, and that was it. You had entities, attribute, metadata, and that was it. What you can get with NGSI LD is you can get a structured graph. So where you have an entity can have properties, and that property can also have properties, and that property of a property can also have properties, and that property of a property of a property can also have properties. So you can end up with a hierarchy of information even within one entity. Also, relationships are now well defined as being a separate concept. A relationship is traveling down the nodes of the knowledge graph. So, if, for example, I have I own a cow. My cow has a URN, and the cow has got an animal collar, and that animal collar has also got a URN because it's a separate device, which would have separate attributes. So you can travel from A to B to find out what's going on. And therefore, you can navigate and get more information of the system as a whole. Data model, basic data model for all of this, and this will come up in the next hour and a half when Alberto is talking about it, is that every entity has got an ID, obviously, because it must be unique. You can see the ID is following the Ngsi Ld type, which has got is a URN followed by the type of the attribute followed by unique ID. It has got an actual type, which again should be somewhere in your context file, and this is saying that this is a type of building, and it needs to be fully qualified. If you don't place this sort of information into your context file, it will automatically fall into the default context, which is means that you can get data in and out, but it's not very useful for being able to push to third parties, because obviously I don't know what a local context building is. I would only recognize what that URI when it's a long URI is. Now, similarly, any entity can have a series of properties, as you well know. However, we now well define this as saying, okay, I have an address. The address is of the schema.org address format, which is, again, a fully qualified name. And this means that I know that within that value, there will be things like a street name and a city name and a country name and a postcode and so on and so forth, because that is defined in that particular URN. You can also add in metadata. The metadata is no longer restricted to just being in a metadata attribute. It's properties of properties or relationships of properties. So things like saying, this address is verified. That is talking about information about that address, or this temperature reading occurred 30 seconds ago. That is information about this property. Or this temperature reading is in Fahrenheit. Again, that would be important to know that what 42 means is going to be different depending whether it's 42 centigrade or 42 Fahrenheit. You may also have relationships, as I said, linking from one entity to another, managed by, you've got a person entity and it's they're managed by someone else. Or you could have further on, like, X is managed by Y, who is subordinate to Z. So you can see how you can navigate the graph in this particular case. Reading an entity, as you would expect, is very much like NGSI v2. All you've got to do, and this is annoying at first, but makes a lot of sense when you realize that this is essential, is add this strange link header thingy into the middle. The link header is saying, okay, as far as I am concerned, the set of URNs we are using for our data set is in that location there. This means that your link data, your @context, needs to be on a public server which has got high availability. And the response is pretty much what you'd expect for a NGSI response. You can either get it in normalized format, or you can get it in JSON format. Now, because you've got this @context in there, you could, if you wanted to, do funny tricks like the one I've done on category here, which is saying, okay, I now want to use JSON LD because every NGSI LD response is a JSON LD response. It's an expanded subset of JSON LD. Okay, I want to do an expansion and compaction operation so that I can find out, well, what I actually meant by category, which is commercial, is actually a proper URN, which could be of use to somebody further down the chain, because then you're talking, rather than just a short string, you're talking about a well-known URI. Again, you can see that on the right, what we've got here is this is doing it in key values format, but you could do the more verbose normalized format, which actually is much more useful if you're talking about things like artificial intelligence, because they really don't understand. They really need to understand in depth what the relationships between the various entities are, and that's what the NGSI bit of Ngsi Ld is talking about. So, what do you call a location? Well, you could call it any of these things, couldn't you? And under Ngsi v2, you are mandated. You can call it an attribute whatever you like. You can call it location, you call it Standort, you could call it Okibasho, you could call it geocoordinates, you call it whatever you like. However, this ain't good enough for Ngsi Ld, because we want to talk about a well-defined attribute name so we can do things like geofencing. Okay, in order to do that, the core context has got about 40 attributes and names which can't be overridden, and one of them is location. A location is always an Etsy URI location. Like Harpreet Singh was really that LinkedIn element, and that is always going to be the case. You've got things like unit code. Unit code goes into the metadata, the property of properties, and that is always going to be a unit code. You've got observe that. Observe that is useful for the temporal property, temporal relationships. Always going to be a property of a property. It is in the core context. Similarly, definition of what Ngsi itself is. You can see type and ID. The reason why you don't need to put the at onto the entities is because it is already defined. ID and type are already defined in there, as is the structure of the system. So, previous slide is just saying what the structure of the API does. However, you need to provide your own data models. And Alberto will be going into this into more detail. And this will depend very much on what your domain is. You don't need to worry about robotics if you are dealing in a traffic system. You don't need to worry about agriculture if you're dealing in a smart cities system. So you need to just define all your attributes and sub-attributes in a context. There's a little tool I wrote the tutorials which will do most of that for you, and you can just get a listing. Getting enumerations is doesn't work off the bat at the moment. Would require an additional expansion compaction operation. This is the first bit of your homework. This is a slide which has got a load of videos about Json LD, Ngsi Ld, Ngsi Ld tutorials, and smart data models. Read them, view them, understand them, and we will be quizzing you on them next week. Again, I can put this into a more public system later. That is the first part. I have more, but I'm now just going to go back to AirMeet and see if, what questions you've put up. So, do we have any questions on the side yet? I can see no questions. So, I'm not looking the right place, or should I keep going on? I'll keep going on then. Feel free to interrupt me if you prefer. Right, so this is part 2. specifically an introduction to Ngsi LD. Once again, we have a lot of links which you should understand. It is, I'm not going to tell you how to do the basics of Json LD, because there are already plenty of useful videos by the Json LD guys themselves, who will tell you what is Json LD, what is the core markup, how can you get your data in and out of your in and out of your system. I will assume that you can go off and do this rather than listen to a video whilst we're doing stuff online, and we can continue with the Ngsi LD stuff, which is the fireware specific stuff on top of this. Again, these links, these slides will be made available, so you can go in there. The important point here, the Json LD playground is very, very useful for being able to transform your data from one format to another. And of course, your supplier's data will be in the wrong format. You can guarantee it. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of overlap with the previous one. As I said, this is expansion of.
Sorry, Jason.
Hello?
Sorry to interrupt you, but we lost your screen, so we're not seeing your material right now.
That's not very useful. Okay, right. Let's see what I can do. Okay, right.
Thanks for letting us know in the chat as well.
Share screen, window. That's not that one, that one. Okay, so you were seeing not very much. Fortunately, the first two slides were not particularly important. You've seen this one already, but the important point here is to point out that Ngsi LD payloads are valid Json LD, and therefore you can guarantee that what your output will be is Json LD. You are seeing it now, I hope. Just a minute, I'll go into that one.
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
You can see it now. Okay, fine. Fortunately, this is just recapping. There's a bit of overlap from the previous presentation. So the important point here is that Json LD payloads are valid Json LD. Therefore, you can do everything you can do with Json LD with Ngsi LD. As I said, it's an extended subset. Now, this is a more in-depth version of the core context. I showed a little snippet of it previously. You can see, and I've split this into various different sections. You can see that all of the various primitives must be well defined. So date, time, all the JSON context must be well defined. This is actually taken from direct from GeoJSON LD as part of their standard vocab. So you can define things like features or feature collections or line strings or points or whatever. And then you move on to the next section, which is saying, okay, there are various operations which are required within Ngsi ILD, like setting up a context source or a subscription or what have you. Those need to be well defined. Then you look at the attributes, which are on the right-hand side. The attributes, things like coordinates, which is obviously important for GeoJSON, has to be well defined. You can see all of this information must be part of your context in order for the receiving system to be able to get hold of information it can understand. This means it's a pain up front because you need to put in your URNs. However, it means that you don't need to modify the system behind all this to start sending huge long URNs all the time, because this is all in the context instead. This is the difference between V2 and LD. As you can see, it is minimal. You've got instead of JSON payloads, you can either have JSON payloads or JSON LD payloads. The difference being whether you are doing an accept header of application JSON or an accept header of LD plus JSON. That's all it is. The endpoints are the same. They're just on different parts of the different endpoints. So it's registrations or subscriptions are now under V1 Ngsi LD. So let's see if I can actually get a demo running up on screen, and let's see if see if you lose me. So where are we? That's what we want, is that one. So that one. You'll find that there are, no, V2, I want to be V2. You'll find that there are a load of Ngsi LD tutorials on already available online within the Fireware GitHub. They are complementary to the existing Ngsi V2 tutorials, and they are typically doing precisely the same operations. Ngsi LD version is based around entities around a smart farm, just so that you can notice that you're doing something different, but it looks very, very similar. All we've got in an initial system, as you can see, minimize that, here, is we've just got an application talking to our context broker. Our context broker requires a database, but that's it. Right. Okay. Come on, tab. Can you see my postman now?
No, we still see your presentation.
Okay, I'll just. Now, how do I do that then? Right, I'll stop sharing. I'll stop presenting that. I'll present the other one. That was this one. Okay, so do it this way. Now, can you see something?
Your presentation again, unfortunately.
I'll stop presenting on that then. What's happened now? Now, what can you get? I'll minimize that. Right, so share. All right.
Yes, now we can see your screen.
Right, yeah, this is the problem when you're trying to do three things in a relatively new system. Again, there are a load of postman collections you can get hold of, particularly on the Ngsi LD side, which will get you started in this system. We've got things like getting started. We've got things like the real-time processing and so on and so forth. Now, where's the one I want? Getting started. Getting started. Working with Ngsi LD context. There we go.
Jason, maybe you want to maximize the postman so that.
Yeah, I'm going to. So is that on 3000? Yes, it should be. Now, there we go. So what I've done is I've created my very own @context file. And you can see here that I'm in agriculture, which is why I talk about cows. And I've got things like animal and device and building and herbicide. And then after having defined my entities, I can continue down and I define my attributes. And you can see all of these have got either a direct URL, like these are well-defined entities by OpenStreetMap, or they have got this colon in the middle, which is saying, okay, use whatever the prefix was plus this. Now, these models here are coming direct from the Smart Data Models project, and therefore these are publicly available, well-defined models which I can then use. Okay, so I can get hold of that. I could, if I wanted to. So slow. augment my context, because the context is what's used by the context broker. However, the file can actually be more verbose. So you could actually, if you wanted to, add in an at graph, which would then, a bit at the bottom, scroll down, which would say, okay, as far as I'm concerned, a filling level is a property which has got the following bit of text in it. It can be defined in English. You could also say, okay, it would link to the following sort of attributes and so on and so forth. This gives you a lot of information, if necessary, to pass on your information. But the basic one is the Ngsi Ld one, and this one is I would use for Json LD. I'll just check that the context broker is up, because demos always fail. Yeah, you can see that I've got something in the background. It's been running for 4 minutes. That's good. So let's create an entity. Creating an entity is really just the same as you'd expect for V2. Now we look at the headers first. You say I'm content type JSON. My body should look like a lump of JSON, which it does, and there's an at context line in there. And that's basically all you need to, the only difference you need to think about is I must pass in a context. If I don't pass in a context, it won't work. As you'd expect, you get an HTTP request back. Doesn't give you back any data, because it's a context broker. Context broker will tend to do stuff using HTTP status codes. I can create another entity. When I create the second entity, again, say a similar body, I can then do operations like getting stuff by ID or by type or whatever. If I just get hold of one building, it's just coming back. Yeah, this is standard CRUD stuff. This is what you would expect for any API. You can look into the more details. However, I can do something a little bit cleverer. Now, I'm just getting hold. If I'm a German operation, instead of getting buildings, I could get Gebäude. Why? Because when I send that, it's now responding to me in German rather than in English. Why? Because if I look at my headers, I'm using a different at context. I'm using an alternate at context, which is saying, as far as I am concerned, all these short names are in use, adresse, category, and what have you, rather than using the ones which are defined when I upsert it into the context broker. So I can actually change my attributes. And indeed, if I wanted to, I could even go in and change the enumerations, as I mentioned earlier. So you can see I can change stuff, which is great, because I don't need to rely on what your organization is giving me. I can take your stuff and say, give it to me in this format. Give it to me with these values. Now, the majority of data exchange will either be done using a GET, or it'll be done using a subscription, which we'll come into later. And the important part of the API here is the queue parameter. Queue parameter means that I can say, give me all the entities which have got a category of a barn or farm auxiliary, or give me one which has got the name of what have you. Queue is just queue equals, and then there's a syntax for things like ands, ors, equals, greater thans, less thans, etc., etc. So you can find out what barns have I got in my system. I don't know if I've got a barn in my system at the moment. Yes, I have. You know, I've got the big red barn. There we go, which is in the middle of Berlin. Similarly, queue doesn't necessarily have to be done on attributes. it can be done on sub-attributes or sub-attributes or whatever. Now, you'll probably notice, if you look at the URL here, the queue, I've got this funny %5B, %5D in Postman. Well, that is because a context broker expects that you have URI encoded requests. So it's not necessarily totally human there, but this is what a machine to machine would do. You just URI the request. That's a square bracket basically, which means that you can actually get hold of the information you want. Moving on. There are a series of batch endpoints, so you can put in multiple values at one time. You can see here I'm putting in multiple temperature sensors, and you can also see that something like Unicode, because it is one of these special entities like observed at and Unicode, it doesn't need to be in additional brackets, but it's a property of a property. I can create some temperature gauges. I can then create some filling sensors as well whilst we're at it. Same sort of thing. Again, entity upsert. Let's get some devices. You can see here I'm getting a type, comma, type, so I can get hold of multiple types on a thing. I can do the same thing with ID if necessary. So if at first glance you're thinking, okay, I'm using this as a database, yes, it's a very bad database, but that's not what it's there for. You can see I've done key values, so don't get the additional metadata when we're coming back. You can see it, but I'm getting my information back. But each one of these is well defined. Now I can actually add in relationships. This is where you start navigating the knowledge graph properly. And you can see, look at the body. I can just add in a relationship by saying this is a relationship. Great. You can add in multiple. If you want to add in multiple relationships, you need to add a data setter ID as well. The syntax is somewhat more complex. Then you can do standard operations like I want to get hold of what I'm related to, or probably more importantly, the direction. She's saying, okay, this one is saying where is temperature sensor 01 located? What is the controlling asset? Controlling asset is one of those well-defined URNs in the device data model saying this is what this device is dealing with. So you can a computer can understand, okay, as far as we are concerned, this temperature sensor 1 is controlling farm building 1. Fine, not a problem. The reverse operation can also be attempted. Reverse operation is saying, okay, what entities have got a controlling asset of building farm 1? You can see the syntax is based around that Q parameter, and just give me back what the controlling asset actually is. And it says, okay, well, you can find that I've actually put in both temperature sensor 1 and filling sensor 1 are based in building farm 1. You need to be able to understand this in order to navigate from A to B, because obviously in a situation where you have, say, a temperature reading and the temperature reading is 0, then you might want to navigate to the device to find out if the battery level is 0, or it might be that it's frozen. It's possible, but it might be worthwhile finding out when other information about the device which is offering the stuff. Similarly, if you're doing many to one, you need to do a slightly different syntax. you can create a bridge table if necessary, which is saying, okay, this is a bridge table, sorry, not many to one, where you could have a concept such as a task, and a task is basically connecting worker to a field, to a product, to a description, and you can say when it would do, and you can read the information from that. Or relationships with properties, the last one I'm going to show off here. No, not sin. Oh, okay, so that was not set up properly. But you could also get hold of information about the attribute itself, which I haven't put into this system, and then obviously get hold of the metadata. So as I said, the main part from the main points from the basic API are: you've got properties, which can be extended. You've got relationships, which can be extended. And then we move on to the how do you communicate between multiple elements, in which case we have to start looking at subscriptions and registrations. So I'm going to move to a different application for a little bit. Let's stop this. There we go. I'm just going to start up the little smart farm, not a smart farm, smart supermarket, but I'm actually using this in a linked data format. So we've got to get a little application running so we can see what's actually going on. I've got the LD one on here, I think. So I'm going to wait for my application to start up again. There we go. And that's what we're after. So it's just clearing out my database, taking a little bit of time. The problem with using AirMeet is that AirMeet does use an awful lot of CPU, so it takes me quite some time to get stopped and started on my system. So whilst we're waiting for the thing to shut down and restart. Subscriptions are the main way of getting hold of information from a context broker. It's event-based stuff. Now, it is possible to do virtually everything using subscriptions rather than registrations. But what this means is that I have an endpoint. The endpoint is listening on a known URL, it's a microservice, and I tell the context broker, okay, when something happens, inform me about it. Now, you can imagine that this could be used for devices, and indeed it's possible to set up your devices such that I make a change on the context broker, the subscription fires, the subscription then says, okay, let's do something that's removing okay, it's slowly getting there, very, very slow. I am slowly getting there, and I want to do something in the real world. Fine, not a problem. Registrations can do the same thing, but there's a serious difference. Registrations are saying something along the lines of, okay, that attribute or that entity, I know where I can get information about it. Now, in the case of a large federated system, you could have multiple context brokers federating into a system. So let's say you've got a city, and you could have the traffic broker, which would understand where the traffic is. But you could also have the street lighting broker, and that would understand that there's problems with the street lights over in this particular quarter. Now, you could find out by connecting those together that you've got an overall viewpoint of what's happening on the roads within a federated system. Federated system is much more tightly bound than the stuff which we're dealing with in Eiffel Trust. in that it's all the stuff within my system. If you are going to federate, then you're saying, okay, you know about them, I know about them, we can all deal with this guy together. Whenever you tell me, whenever you change something, I'll change something, if it's something I'm interested in, and so on and so forth. So you're not likely to be using registrations when you have these data barriers. You're much more likely to be wanting to use a subscription in order to continue with the same system, because that way I am not bound to change things when you are going to change things. The way that devices work at the moment is typically based on registrations, because you're typically talking about a situation with one context broker. It is, however, possible to set up the system to use what are known as bidirectional attributes, which is a subscription mechanism to do the same thing. Within the ETSI committee on Ngsi Ld, there is still, and it's getting nearly there, there are still discussions ongoing as to how actuation should be properly defined, and whether these or more systems are to be supported. So what we need to do here in the system that's coming up is that we need to have a context broker, and we need to have an available at context. And at the moment, it's still waiting for the context broker to come up. It's taking an awful long time. So I think what we should do is see if there's any questions, and try and wait for whilst we're waiting for the thing to start up. So oh no, there we go. There we go. You see, it's now loading my initial supermarket data, and I've already got a well-defined at context locally. Locally, no, it's on the internet, so it's public, which is saying I'm now getting hold of some information, and we're up. Okay, so let's get running. So that should be the case that I can go. So I'll just start my little smart supermarket. The reason why it's running so slowly is purely because my setup is not designed to be running AirMeet and a context broker. So okay, so we've got a little store here, which is NB. Okay. So if we look at store one, I've just upserted a load of entities programmatically. It's taken a long time. There we go. And at the moment, I've got not that much information. I've got a location and maybe a few items on sale or what have you. So what I can do if I'm using a subscription is I can say, when something happens, tell me about it. And this is going to be very much dependent on what attribute I'm looking at, number of items, and what logic I want to place into it, the Q parameter. So when the number of items is less than 10, whenever number of items changes and number of items is less than 10 located in store one, give me the following attributes. You can do it in key values format. You can do it in v2 format if you're using Orion LD, which is useful for when you're connecting to other Firework components which prefer Ngsi v2 over LD. And then you say, okay, and then I will inform this endpoint about what's actually happening. Note that once again, I have to provide the context, and this is just telling me what those long names would actually be. I can do the same thing for the a second store. Now, at the moment, not very much will happen. But if I start buying beer, actually, I need to Whilst we're at it, I can get the notification up. Application monitor. Keep buying some more beer. You can see that the low stock notification has been received, and we get the information which we've requested has been sent to that endpoint. Because I asked him for key values format, it is just giving me in the data, it's just giving me the located in number of items and what item is being stocked. Because I gave it that particular context, it's saying stocks rather than something in German or whatever. So this means that what I'm receiving is going to get information it can understand. Registrations. Registrations are a little different. Once again, you need to be in a position to say, okay, I have an endpoint. The endpoint is able to receive a context source request, and that is then going to say what is going to come through, and it says, okay, as far as I'm concerned, for this ID, this building, the attribute tweets is provided by this particular endpoint. Better with add data. Oh. That's better. The reason why you'll sometimes find properties and sometimes find property names is it depends on the version of Ngsi Ld that's running, because the core context has changed in that respect. So in some cases it's looking for property names, which is the newer version. Properties is in the core context 1.1, and the property names is in core context 1.3, which is why it didn't work on me to begin with. So what we can find now is, again, but for both subscriptions and registrations. Actually, I'll get subscriptions first. You can do the usual CRUD operations. You can find out, what's actually running, how many subscriptions I've got. Move it up a bit. And you can see what the queue parameter is. You notice that the queue parameter has been expanded in the subscription itself, because the fact that you sent number of items means nothing. It's just the short name you are using locally. But what the queue parameter is actually dealing with is the proper URNs. Hence the reason why it's expanded them to the long information. And is that one? Yeah, you can see it. Whoops, I've gone too far. And you will find that there are useful things like time sent and last notification, and whether it's a success or not, which only appear once you've actually got a working subscription. Now, with my registration, I need to say registration for a certain type. This type is for building, and we're saying, okay, what registrations have we got for building? And you can say, hey, yes, I've got this thing which is saying for type building for this particular store, I'm getting tweets from over there. So that is just saying that, yes, I've got this. Again, you can do your CRUD, you can do your update, you can do your delete, you can do your modify, etc., etc. Now, if I now read from store one, you can see that it's got some tweets. Now, these tweets are not held in the context broker. What's actually happening is I'm doing a GET request. I'm doing a GET request to context broker Orion with this request, and because it is found as a registration, the same request is then passed on direct to the context provider. So my context provider, the thing which is actually getting my tweets, is receiving this particular request. As you can see, it's the same GET request. It's the same entity. Because only the tweet attrs are is being provided by that context provider, it's annotated in the attrs. This is part of the standard Ngsi Ld API. This is how you would get just a single attribute from a single entity. And you can see this is passed to my little service, which is then sending me my tweets, and it's giving me some Douglas Adams quotes. Fine, you can do the same thing if you want to with, say, a patch. This means it's rather obvious how to connect these things together, because if I wanted to update, I would have a patch, and the patch would have, again, another Douglas Adams quote, and it's an array. And then you can see that this is going direct to the context provider. It's not going to Orion. I can actually retrieve it directly. Now, just briefly go back to my thing on screen. You can see at the moment it's got the existing tweets is being received from elsewhere. If I update the context provider directly, and then refresh this, you can see that the tweets have changed. I mean, it's not rocket science. It means that you can change something by changing it directly. Wow. However, you could also, instead of going to the context provider, you can go direct to the context broker. Go to Orion itself. Orion can then say, okay, you can talk to your context broker indirectly. So your context provider indirectly. And if I just change the suite of tweets to get some more quotes, again, you can see the body here. What will happen is I'm sending a request to the context broker. The context broker realizes there's a registration for that attribute. It therefore forwards the request to the context provider. Context provider deals with it within a reasonable period of time, and then comes back. You can see it's given us a status code of no content, which is fine, which is what you'd normally expect for a successful. It is possible that the forwarding the context provider might be offline at the moment, in which case you'd expect it to be giving something like a 406. You're giving some sort of error message saying, I can't do that operation right now. Okay, so if we read from the store now, as you'd probably expect, even though I didn't update the context provider directly, if I then go to the store and then look at my tweets, move this back up again. And there we go. You can see the tweets have been updated. Whilst we're looking at it, I've uploaded a proper example of how you do arrays of relationships. You add in a data set ID so that you can index the individual elements themselves. So in this particular case, where I have got 3 items of furniture in my building, and if I wanted to, I could either update the furniture as an array, or I could update individual or refer to individual entities in the URNs. So if I now just go finally back to the here, we should find our final quote. And you can see, yeah, fine. I could never get the hang of Thursdays, or in this case, Tuesdays. So that is the main functions of the context broker. We'll be going to stuff in more detail next week, but this is just a whistle-stop tour of what you would expect these things to do. Current slide. So that's how we created an entity. Please shout if you can, if you're not seeing my presentation again now. I assume that's okay then. Yeah.
No, we are not seeing your presentation.
All right, fine. Right. So what are we doing wrong there? I'll just not share and share again. All right. Present to audience. Share screen. Window. PowerPoint. Share. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, you're up now. Fine. So where were we? Okay, so I showed all the operations. It's just a summary. There are actually three formats. This says two, but there are actually three formats you can retrieve. You can retrieve either application LD plus JSON, which means that you've got the app context element within the JSON file, or application JSON, in which case the context is held in a header. But it is also possible to have application geo plus JSON, in which case you're going to get information coming back in GeoJSON format. That's more advanced, and I'll show you that next week. I've done that one already. Okay, so with relationships, as I pointed out, this is rather important. You need to be able to use your at context to be able to give as much information as possible, so that the system can contact. I would define what sort of types I expect to find in this particular attribute and what have you, and therefore you can use an at graph. At graph is not required by a context broker for its day-to-day operations. However, it is useful for third parties when they want to understand more about the data, and the at context is what's coming through in that case. I've done creating entities. You can either use the short version, which I did, or you could actually use the at type and the full URI if you wished. I wouldn't bother, because this is just showing that JSON LD, Ngsi Ld is JSON LD, so you can use the JSON LD formats as well. The reason why you can use the short version is because the core at context defines that type. So you can create a type, and you can see this has got this particular one has got multiple relationships, or relationships of relationships, in that you can have requested by, or located in, or status of work, or what have you, which means that you can get a hierarchy of these things. I said this is where I define my at context. Now it would be possible to retrieve information in, say, Japanese. About the data model, or English, or whatever, or this is so that you can get additional information. If you are using things like RDFS tags on your at graph, you need to define the RDFS URI within the at context as well. This is all fairly standard JSON LD. And therefore, you'll get more and longer examples within either the Ngsi Ld tutorials or the JSON LD specification. I've showed you that. Subscriptions. Now, the payload, as you can see, is slightly different to the way that you would get a payload from Ngsi v2. However, data is fairly obvious. It's the data is what you'd get from that queue parameter when you send stuff forward. There we go. Here we go. This is the reason why my example didn't work. Property names and relationship names. You need to be careful here, because there was a clash between the definition of the word properties. Properties is defined within the GeoJSON LD at context, and because Ngsi Ld uses GeoJSON for its geographic points and what have you, it should accept the full GeoJSON LD at context, and therefore you might need to call properties, you might need to call it property names. So, how does linked data actually help? Well, linked data helps because the third party doesn't know what you've got unless you tell it, and that's always a problem with data exchange. A typical example of how this works on the web is if you go into a search engine and you look for Lego, it will probably give you a star rating for the product. And the reason it knows that somewhere on that page there is a review and a rating and what have you is because someone has bothered to mark up in that HTML page a lump of Json LD which says this is an attribute. This is a rating. This is a review. This product is in stock. And the one which tends to be used is schema.org product. This is why you want to use your standard data models, which is coming up in 15 minutes, because that way third parties can understand and know what the product is. Similarly, you could actually, if we were to take that Ngsi Ld tutorial, you could get a third party like a automated robot, which could actually know that this is a shelf, know that this is a product, know that the product could come from somewhere else, and then could do the automated filling. And that was a very brief introduction to Ngsi Ld and Json LD, and I think I'm done now. So if I stop sharing that screen, I would be able to pass you over to Alberto.
Jason, there's one question in the questions section.
I cannot see the questions. Where are the questions then? Or could you just read it out?
Okay, I can read it out. So the question is, would you recommend to define one @context file per entity type, or is it preferable to define one general @context used for all the entities of a given use case, or both?
And who asked that question?
It's Vincent Desmortier.
That's a good question. Seriously, that's a good question. The way I would do it is as follows, right? I would have one @context file for my well-defined types. So in my agricultural example, I have got one which has got animals, buildings, devices, blah, blah, blah. And I keep on adding on to that, saying, this is my definition of the world. Because, to be honest, it's only a couple of kilobytes. It's not that big. And I can generate these, and I can keep on adding in new attributes, sub-attributes, fine. I then would have a second @context file, which would be an @context combining my stuff and the core context. Now you can do this, and I'll probably get the syntax wrong, but I'll. Where are we? No, I think I showed it on one of the things here, didn't I? Something like that. Just a minute. I'm just going to bring something up on screen in a second.
Okay.
Right, I'll now try sharing again. So I would have a second @context file, which hopefully you can see on screen right now.
Yes.
Yep, which would just have whatever I've defined, and the last element as being the core context. Technically, this is not required for Ngsi Ld because the core context is assumed, but in that, for Json Ld, it isn't, because obviously Json Ld is more generic. So this is a valid core context, and also for Ngsi Ld, and a valid core context for Json Ld. And as such, I would then be able to offer this file would be the one I would offer into the outside world. Now, what I think Vincent was on about was doing things like multiple contexts, which again is valid. I would try and keep my initial context, but this could be, say, the first one could be my stuff. However, there might be a subset which is, I don't know, it could be some authority which has got a well-defined stuff. You could do it that way, and then you could have someone else as being another context. In which case, I am then splitting up what I've got, and then what other people are defining. Problem with this is that I potentially have, you can be pretty certain that the core context won't change. The core context is versioned, which is why it's a different URL to get the 1.3 to get the 1.1. So when it breaks, you can tell that's going to happen. Do I trust authority 1 or authority 2 not to change their context? That's the big question. Because if I don't trust them, I would be much better placing it into my file, copying it into my file, and I know that my file is going to be publicly available. I know they're not going to switch off that server. They're not going to do something else. And then I know that the data I am offering is safe. If I rely on authority B or authority C, then what I'm saying is that, yes, I trust your data models, and I assume that you're not going to change stuff. Now, their file will contain the same things as I could put in here. So I don't see any real benefit of not just stuffing all the additional stuff into my own personal context and then offering my context. Reason why this isn't an issue is that any decent context broker will cache context. So if I've defined a device type, that's fine. And I will then not need to get it again. Similarly, there is no harm in placing core context as part of your as part of your list of contexts, because if it's already recognised as being, yes, I've already got that context, it won't be read in again, and therefore it won't be an issue. Now, normally what would happen at this point is that I would say, let's talk about this over coffee, but we're going to have to do that virtually. So I think that's as far as I can get at this point right now. So Vincent, I'd love to chat with you over coffee about this to find out what your actual needs are.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jason. We have
a damn good question too.
Sorry?
It was a bloody good question.
Yeah, I'm guessing you can maybe also chat in the lounge during the break.
That's what I'm thinking. I'll make myself available in the lounge.
Okay, perfect. We got another question. So from Manix Mankani, do you still suggest to save a copy of the referenced context files in our own infrastructure in case of remote access failure? Is there a way of referencing multiple context files for the same entity?
Generally, I would say host these on your own system. I don't like trusting other people. As I said, the Etsy one, yes, you probably are okay with. but I wouldn't trust. And Alberto might like me for saying this. I wouldn't trust smart data models because it's a live changing specification. I want to make sure that I have I have the version I'm used to. If someone wants to change what the definition of device is, I want to know about it. So I would. That's why I would prefer to have my own static copy of smart data models or the elements of smart data models, rather than rely on someone else. I also really don't like relying on other people's infrastructure. One thing I have discovered recently, whilst playing around with the temporal interface, which again is something which is going to be dealt with next week, is that it is really useful to keep your context file on in a separate container, because that way you have no access problems. I was getting really slow responses, particularly when I'm using AirMeet, because I'm effectively crippling my system. And one of the problems I was having was that my containers weren't, the container which was providing the data and was providing the context files wasn't getting sufficient CPU. So it's much better to just place it nicely onto a small container. I just use Dockerization of HTTPD to say, okay, here are my files, take them when you want them. And of course, what you could do quite easily is have a local copy for when you're within your system, but also have something which could expose that externally for when other people wish to get hold of your data.
Okay, thank you, Jason. This was the last question we have here. And if we don't have any more questions, I think we can go into the break. Should we go until 10:35 or should we just do 10 minutes? Jason or Alberto, what would you prefer?
I think it's up to Alberto when he wants to start.
It's up to you. So.
Oh, you're the boss. Yeah, you're the host.
I don't know. I don't know what is the regular use. So we could
best have a 15-minute, I think.
Okay.
So 10:35 then.
Perfect.
10:35. I can grab a coffee and I'll be sitting in the virtual lounge.
Okay. See you at 10:35.
Okay. Okay, supposedly people is connecting. Okay. So do you introduce myself or do I go directly?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So, thank you. Good morning. My name is Alberto Abella. I'm working for Firework Foundation. We're going now for the second part of the session of today, regarding the introduction to smart data models. Please feel free to make questions during the presentation, because I'm glad to answer the questions during the session is happening, and not waiting for the last moment to answer, because maybe we can lose some of the points. So I guess that you are seeing my screen, not in full presentation mode. Let me go for it. Yeah, now I guess yes. So that's the contents of the goals of this session. So you will be introduced to the Smart Data Models Initiative, but on the contrary to many of other sessions, this session is dedicated to make you some kind of an expert on the initiative, so from the practical point of view. So we'll explain the basics about how the initiative, what's about, how it's governed, and what are the participating entities. So what specific verticals or domains are already available and how is expected to grow, and how can you contribute to existing data models, okay, and how can you contribute with new data models for the initiative. So by the end of the session, you will be able to implement a service using a smart data model. And of course, you will be able to become an active participator or an active contributor of the Smart Data Models Initiative. So the session will be basically divided in two parts. The first part will be more introductory, and the second part, which accounts maybe and a half, will be absolutely practical. So we'll do just an actual case, and this example will be possibly, if you complete, become a new data model of the initiative. So I don't know if there is any pre-question before we start. So you can use the chat or the questions resource, and I'll be happy to address it. Just 10 seconds of reflection. I guess that the answer is no. Then there is, I heard the sound. No, it's not from the chat. It's not from the questions. Yeah, here we are. So first, introduction. What is the Smart Data Models Initiative? Let me just drink. It's an initiative which is it's composed by three entities. First of all is the IUDX, which is the Indian Urban Data Exchange, which is a public entity which supports the data interchange for smart cities in India. Okay, it's a large initiative, and they have adopted Ngsi Ld standard. So therefore, there will be good users of this. And not only this, but they have also committed to use the smart data models defined at the Smart Data Models Initiative. Okay. Second entity is TM Forum. Possibly you know, it's a large worldwide telecommunication association. Okay, and last but not least, we are the Firework Foundation, we are the curator of the open source Firework platform and its ecosystem. And the idea of this initiative is to be open to new members. There will be new members, let's say, for specific domains, but there can be also some expansion for new members into the steering board. So maybe today at April 2021 we are 3, but maybe by the end of the year this will be different. Okay, first question, what is the Smart Data Models Initiative? First of all, it's a community site. What does it mean, community? It means that the contents of the site of the initiative is created by the community. It's not created by the members of the initiative. The members of the initiative, what is providing is support and guidance, okay, and the resources for organizing the community. But it's not something which we create as a Firework Foundation, neither IUDX, neither TM4. Okay, what we provide are detailed data models developed for open use for multiple sectors, for many domains. We'll explain later what is a detailed data model, okay? But it's something that you can use in practical in practical projects. Okay, it's not something which is theoretically defined, but something that you have used and you can use immediately. Okay. We are not doing this alone. Of course, these three organizations are in the steering committee, but there is plenty of other organizations which are actively contributing into the different domains of the initiative. There is more than 20 right now, and we expect this thing to grow consistently. Okay. What we provide across the different data models which are in the initiative is coherence and consistency. So we call the same things the same way in every data model. So if we define a name for, let's say, the weather domain, or for the water domain, if we define that the name is a string, a name will be a string independently of the domain that we are using this attribute. Okay, so therefore, when you are interchanging data, which is what is this initiative about, you will, if you see a name, you definitely know what data type you can expect to be coming. Okay, another different. difference is that we provide with an agile standardization. So we are trusting on a very quick adaptation and very quick answer compared with the classic standardization methods. Very, very quick, and we mean weeks instead of months or years, which is in the classic standardization, for the evolution of these data models. Okay, and we try not to create incompatible or backwards incompatible versions whenever it's possible. Okay, of course, all these data models are useful if you are using the Firework platform because they are compatible, but we are expecting to extend this interoperability into some other platforms. So it will be easier for you if you are using these data models with the Firework platform to connect with other technical resources because they can share the same data models that you are using in the platform. Okay, it is also true that it saves you your time in case that you want to launch a new project and you need to define some of the entities, especially into if you are using a digital twins approach. We will not be talking about this, but I strongly recommend you to look for this kind of approach because we are quite active on this technical discipline. Okay, and what we are doing is releasing all these data models with an open license, which allows you 3 rights. The first right is to use without paying anything, freely use. You can modify these data models for your specific needs, and you can share the modifications with others. Okay, you don't specifically need to share back with the initiative, but of course we'll be happy to receive if there is something valuable or some contribution of your project. Let me insist, which is some of the difference with other initiatives. These data models are based on real case scenarios, so it's not. I don't want to dismiss the academic approach, but there is not something designed on the design desk and then later testing if it is happening in real projects. We are the other way around. So we have projects, some of them emerging, but some of them quite proved, and then we create the data models out of this. Or the other source of data models are coming from existing and adopted regulations. I mean, I could put an example, which is one of the main ones. The Common Information Model for Energy defines a structure of data models for defining the infrastructure elements on the energy sector. So we have adopted it, and we have translated these standards into data models that you can use it. Okay. The initiative is based on Git. Okay, and currently we have at GitHub as the development frontend, but this could change in some other moment. But currently we are happy with this approach. Okay, and let me insist that we are based on widely adopted standards, so we are not reinventing any wheel. Our goal is not to create the standards, but to go for the last mile of the standards. What do I mean by the last mile? There are many regulations in which you don't get the final details about how to implement it, how to define your data model, how to interchange information. And there could be 2 initiatives sharing the same regulation, but then not being able to be interoperable. We are going for that. We are going to the very last detail, providing you with the data types that you have to include into your data models, therefore making interoperability actually happen. Okay, so let me summarize what are our differential advantages compared with other standardization initiatives. We are agile, so we can create or adapt a data model in weeks, eventually days, if everything goes well, versus months or years that you have in the classical standardization. Of course, if you have a project and you are looking for a standardization, and you have to ask that for the classic standardization body, then your project never happen. Or what is happening in reality is that you create somehow your own standard for your project that is not going to be shared with anybody at all, and it creates a bunch of lack of interoperability for everybody. Okay, and of course, sorry. And create a, a bunch of lack of interoperability for the rest of the users of this project. So the second differential point of this initiative is the easy contribution. We are reducing to the minimum the amount of information that you have to provide for creating a single data model, and we are actually making as automatic as possible everything related with this contribution. The third differential feature of this initiative is that we are based on actual experience. Okay. Oh, yeah. So these data models are not based, let's say, into the decks of an academia or derived from an ontology, but something which is actually on the market. Okay. Another differential advantage is that we are translated automatically our specifications. Therefore, now we have the 4 languages, and possibly will be growing on that in the coming future. And the last point is that due to a decentralized structure, we can change something in one of these data models, and it will affect the rest of the domains immediately, because we have, let's say, a structure of subjects and domains that I'll explain later. Okay, but we don't have to work that much. Okay, what are the structure of this initiative? So first, let me introduce what is an actual smart data model, because there can be some kind of discussion about it. For us, for this initiative, is that smart data model is the combination of 3 elements. Sorry. A technical description of the data types and relationship of the attributes of an element that has to be modeled. So if we are modeling, let's say, the weather observed in a specific area, we have to define every attribute of this and what data type belongs to and what is the structure of that. So a technical description. This technical description, in our case, is coded into Json Schema. A second, what is the part in this Json Schema? We include the definitions of the different attributes, so that we are talking about the same term when we are using. We have a term like Jason mentioned, temperature, that we know that the temperature will be just a numeric value of the temperature in some of the scales, even Celsius, Fahrenheit, or Kelvin, or whatever. Okay, this is the second element, the documented description, and third, some examples of the use of the data model. So let me insist on that, because without that examples, maybe the data model is not going to exist. And let me insist on something based on the experience. When people is contributing with data models, they at the very beginning create the schema, which is the first element of these 3 elements. And when they go for the example, most of the time, they realize, oh, I missed something, I wouldn't do this way. So the examples are kind of a immediate test that this data model is actually going to work. And what is not a smart data model? So you are not going to find out. It's not an ontology describing the elements of an area of knowledge. So we are happy that our areas of knowledge, our domains, are not complete. It doesn't, nothing happens for that. So we keep on growing, and we can have even eventually data models that define partially the same reality. It is not a problem for us, because it depends on the actual use. This is not the goal, but sometimes you can use one data model or the other depending on your use case. Another point that I want to emphasize, what is not a smart data model, is not a new standard. This is not a place for creating standards. So the less data models that we create out of the blue, the better. It's much better to use something which is already existing on the market and happening. And of course, it's not an academic exercise, not at all. I'm an academic myself, so I'm not going to, but it's not the kind of exercise which is not connected with the reality. Let me emphasize that. Okay, what is the structure of this initiative? So there are two main web resources we're going to visit extensively. So first of all, you have one organization at github.com, which is an organization with a group of repositories. You see there 44. There are several others right now. We are around 50 right now. And we are organizing all these data models into these repositories. This site is oriented to developers, so possibly it's oriented to you, so you can go directly there. And the idea for this is just for these contributors, which are experts on GitHub and technical staff. However, these are not the only users of the initiative. There are some other users which are not so technical experts, and therefore they need a different approach for the information. Then we have the site smartdatamodels.org. Okay, both sites are connected with each other. There's plenty of links that can help you on moving from one to the other site. And this is more oriented to the users, and it's allowing you to get informed about what is going on, and if there is something relevant which is affecting to you, because maybe you are not interested on all the data models that is happening at the initiative, but some of the domains, and you can subscribe to that. We'll get into a practical demonstration later. Okay, what is the structure? The structure has, let's say, 3 levels. First level, you have an umbrella repository in which you have, let's say, the guides for coding new data models, templates, some scripting tools to check the data models, and the inventory of domains. Domains are the domains are in the second level. Okay, you can see water, cities, environment. Okay, there is these are actual domains. There are a couple of them more, and in every domain you can have as submodules subjects. What are the subjects? Which is the third level here. The third level of the subject is just groups of data models which share, let's say, a same topic. And in this data model, you have these 3 elements that are composing a data model, which is the technical description, the specification, and the examples. It is also true that sometimes it's useful to have shared elements or shared objects inside the subject or eventually inside the domain, and then we create like a summary of these elements at the subject repo. Okay, it's not a problem. It's something for simplify the description of the data models. And let me point out 2 other repositories which are quite important for the initiative, which are the Incubated and the Harmonization. What is the Incubated repository? The Incubated repository is where the drafting of the data models is happening. It is also true that you can do it in your repository, but if you do it there, we can monitor you, we can provide you with some help and so on. And harmonization are for these data models which are, let's say, pre-approved, because possibly they are coming from existing regulation already adopted, and they are being on the process of having complete the specification, having the schema, having the examples. So there is minor details pending to go for it. Okay, these are some figures of the existing data models. There is a 554, okay, divided into these domains, okay, And in the right part, you see the last subjects that has been created. All of them are coming from this year. So we have plenty of activity like forestry, social media, wastewater, OPC-UA, which is for the integration of some devices, open channel management, which is related with the transport of water through channels, and queue management. Okay, and we are now in the process of including ROS data models, which are ROS is a robotic operative system, and possibly there will happen, if everything goes well, that more than 100 data models will come just in one single shot. There is also, as I've mentioned, the Incubator Repository. Okay, in this Incubator Repository, the people is working, is drafting data models. And currently we have close to 100 new data models which have been developed there into these different domains. You can see some of the folders in which they are described. So I recommend you to visit this folder when you are not finding out something into the official repositories. And now let's go for just a small visit of the main site. Okay, so let me just stop sharing the full screen and go directly to some of these links. So this is the main site of Smart Data Models. Hopefully you are seeing my screen. And you? What you see here is just, which is like any blog. You see a list of posts which are commenting what are the updates of the initiative. So this is from the 23rd, so it's from Friday. This is from Friday as well. So this is Thursday, Wednesday, okay, so on. So it's many things are happening here, and you can get into this one, which is just commenting that there is a new data model for bike lane. And here we could go directly, and this is the data model. This is the front page of the bike lane, and then we could go, imagine that we can go for the specification. Okay, in this case, it's going to download. Okay, let me go here. Okay, here we are. And this is the specification of this data model. This is how a specification looks like. So you have a small description, you have the link to the open license of this data model, and then you have the description of all the properties that you have there. Okay, it's also defined what are the required properties, and you have also here a technical description in YAML, which helps you to find out what kind of property are we talking about. Okay, but not only this, but we also have embedded here the examples of this data model in four versions. There is one version for, as you know, and Json mentioned in the previous session. There is two versions of the Ngsi standard, which is Ngsi V2 and Ngsi Ld. And for every version of this standard, there is two possible formats. One which is key values, like this one, that's simple, or normalized values, which is this format. Okay, so both of them are possibly useful for you. Let me go back to the initiative. Okay, here we are. Okay, what is the second element I want to mention? It's possible to subscribe to the updates, because maybe you are not willing to visit this every day. Then you have here an option in the main menu which is called subscribe. And here in this subscribe, you can subscribe to the different domains. You just put your email here, get subscribed, and then you receive once a week on Fridays. You get a newsletter just with the summary of the post of the last week. Okay. What else do I want to show you? There is also a Twitter account which is Smart Data Models. Let me visit just quickly. Every time that you have a new post or an update, you have a tweet here. So you follow the account. Then let me go for this. Okay, this is the bike lane, which is taking us in a new window is taking us to the same post that we have visited previously. So if you are just more to follow through Twitter, this is your tool. And we are also in the process of having also a LinkedIn group. The group is already open, but we have to connect automatically to the generation of the contents. Okay, so let's go. And if you are a user, possibly you are willing to search into a data model. So here in the main domain, to the main menu, you have an option which is search, which allows you to search for every criteria for every element that you have across this initiative. Imagine that we want to look for a property which has in its name water, then we have below, if you see property name, so anything which has the water word here, so I don't know how many of water, there is 12 properties which has water, okay? And here there is the description, this is the data type, this is the format in the case that they have it, and so on, okay? You can have also the model or the units or the repository name and so on. This is, let's say, the more dedicated tool for searching, but there is, in the front page, there is a more quick. Imagine that we know that there is a data model related, let's say, look for weather. We can write it down. Then it filters just for the name of the data model, not for the property, not for the description. It's just the name of the data model. We can click here, and it opens in a new window. I'm going to force to a new tab, okay? And then it takes us directly to this data model. So you have everything here. The schema, this is the schema.json, okay? And you have everything. Okay, what else do I need to check? Oh yeah, there is also, in the case that you have not so dedicated or not so clear, here in data models you can have the list of data models. So you can look either by the data model name, either by the repository. So if we want, imagine that we want to look for all the data models of the repository weather, then if we filter here, automatically is filtered. So there is currently around 13,000 terms, and we keep on growing on that. Okay, sorry. And now let's go for something that we are going to use extensively into the practical part, which are the services for developers. The first service is the checklist for submitting a new data model. Here into the front page, let me go here. We have the checklist here on the right, and this contribution checklist, it is helping us to create everything that needs to be created in order to complete the data model. Okay, so of course you need only two mandatory elements, which is the schema. So first question is quite obvious. So do you have a schema? And although it seems obvious, I have to tell you that there is some contributions that they are providing just a written specification, and this is something that is not going to be accepted. Okay, and is the schema documented according to the contribution manual? And we'll go later about this contribution manual quick. Have you passed the schema checker? Okay, this schema checker is the same that we have here. Okay, check your schema. And have you checked that the section don't do this in the contribution manual, which is the most common errors that people is making when they are creating a new data model? And just regarding the examples, if you have provided 4 examples for Ngsi V2 and Ngsi Ld, key values are normalized, and you have checked the key values that validates against the schema with the validation tool and the optional documents. If you want to be credited, if you are included your pull request modifications to the contributors.yaml in order to get your credit, if you want to customize your specification, because there is a possibility of doing so, and if you are willing to do, if you are included that into your pull request, and last but not least, if you have signed the contribution agreement. let me go directly to this. What is the contribution agreement? Is the agreement that you have to sign before we accept your contribution. Why is that? Because you have to take into account that every data model has an open license, which entitles you to use it, to share it, and to share the modifications. In order to do it so from the legal point of view, we need you, the contributor, to provide an agreement saying, oh, I'm willing to release this part of intellectual property with this license. And this is what this form is doing. So you put your name, your email, and you have user. And if you are signing this on behalf of yourself, of your organization, in case of your organization, you can include it here and send any comment. And then by accepting this, we are sure from the legal point of view that you are providing the intellectual property, and therefore we are free to release the data model with this license. Okay. Let me go for some others. We'll go. You can create a data model with a spreadsheet. We are going to do it practically, but here you have draft a data model with your spreadsheet, and you can check it here. There are also, you can go directly to the Incubator Repository. We'll visit, but you have here to the front incubated here. I'm going to open just in a new tab. Okay, so this is the Incubator Repository. Plenty of things happening there. So, okay. You can create examples compliant with the data model into Ngsi Ld format. Possibly there will be this not only for Ngsi Ld but also for Ngsi v2. And you can validate your data model if it is well documented, because maybe your JSON schema defining a data model is valid, but if it's not well documented, it won't be accepted. Okay, here we are. So let me, I'm putting into full presentation mode. Yes. Okay, what's next? And now let me explain to you, because this is a training for people who's going to be experts, what is actually inside a data model. All these elements are inside the data model. Let me just emphasize the legend on the right, which says mandatory, optional, and automatic. In a data model, you have just two elements that has to be provided, which is the schema.json and the examples, and that's all, folks. Nothing else from a mandatory point of view. Of course, if you don't have this, then you cannot go any step forward. Optionally, you can include into the adopters.yaml. Adopters.yaml is a file in which you include a use case of this data model, because for whatever reason you want just the dissemination, or you just want to share with others, you can include the data of your project there. You have also the notes.yaml. What is this file about? It's for customizing, for including short paragraphs of content inside the specification, because the specification is created automatically out of your JSON schema. Okay, the schema.json. And if you include there many kind of customization, like where is this data model coming from, or what regulation is this data model compliant with, or whatever, then you can include there. And then the rest of the elements are created automatically. Okay, the license is created automatically if you are not providing. Okay. It used to be Creative Commons, but could be another license, as long as you preserve these three rights: sharing, free use, and sharing of the modifications. The README is pointing to the different elements and is created automatically, so you don't have to provide it. The model.yaml is the technical specification that we saw into the specification, providing some technical details about the different attributes of the data model. And the swagger.yaml is another file which is specifically for the creation of an interactive specification, and in the coming future will be the source for the test of some services. They are not implemented, and so on. Just let me emphasize one last point. the schema.json is only validating the key values payloads for the moment. So currently we only have one schema. Possibly in the coming future we'll have several schemas for validating not only the key values payloads but also the normalized payloads. Okay. Any question that you want to make? Okay, if not, let's go a step. Okay, if you want to become a contributor, this is the process that you need to follow. Okay, and let me review a bit, because this is what we are going to do today in the practical part. So first, do you have a use case of your data model? If the answer is no, then you are into an exception. There are some weird cases in which we can accept the data model without a use case, like an example in some domains in which it's so emerging the discipline that there is not use cases. Okay, this happens in some extreme use of robotics, but not very much. Okay, so possibly you don't have a use case, you are going to get rejected. Okay, or the next check is that is there any data model related. So of course we are not going to include two data models for the same thing, and then if there is a data model, then you go to this 3 number, and then we'll go for the right part of the of the diagram later. Suppose that you have a use case that this data model is not related. Then you can work in 2 ways. First, you can work at your repository. Okay, that's nice, it's good for us. And then when you have finished, then you can create a pull request, and then we'll review it, as you see in the middle. If the review is positive, then you go for the publication. If the review is not positive, then you have to fix your comments. Okay, this is the first option. The second option that is recommended is that you ask permission to contribute into the Incubator Repository. Why is this good? Or why is this even better? Because in this repository there will be many other people working. Of course, during the process of creating the data model, the drafting, it's not strange to have some comments before getting some approval. So it takes just not many time, but several weeks, depending on the intents of your work. There will be some other people willing to see your data model and eventually contributing. Okay, and of course we are also monitoring this repository, and therefore we are capable of providing you with further assistance. If you are working at your repository, okay, we are not capable of seeing anything. Okay, and then if you are working here, the process for approval is quite the same, and the publication process is quite the same. And in case that you are just willing to create an update of a data model, then the pull request you are doing not into the Incubator repository, but in the official repository of the data model. So if you are willing to modify the weather, then you make a pull request on the weather repository, and then we'll review. And if everything is okay, we'll approve it, and then we go for the publication process, or just we'll send you some comments to fix the comments. Okay. Any questions? Because we are finishing what is let's say the theory, and next is the practice. So I have a question. Let me read it. For what I experienced this morning, do not integrate NGSL concepts of temporal property and multi-attribute property. Is that correct? Is planned a lot? Yeah. Let me just comment. The initiative of the Smart Data Models is compliant with NGSI v2 and NGSI LD to the maximum extent. So there are some points or some features of NGSI LD which are not completely developed into the initiative, but for sake of compatibility with NGSI v2. Okay, what we'll do in the coming future, we'll try to do our best on implementing everything. Okay, so there are some elements like the metadata in NGSI v2, which has no direct translation into NGSI LD, and therefore we are not including or some, let's say, internal properties like observe at in the description of any property, which are part of the Ngsi Ld standard, we are not implementing. Why? Because this is not a property that you have into Ngsi v2. So the quick answer is yes, there are some things which are not implemented yet, and the midterm answer is that we are going to implement as much as we can. So be aware, like the validation of payloads specifically for normalized values and these kind of things. So we'll do. But it's not. I cannot tell you. Just a matter of weeks, matter of months. But it's on the, let's say, on the plan. Any other question? Okay, we have only 40 minutes for this part. Okay, let's go for it. So, what I'm expecting from you for the attendees of this session, I'm expecting you to have some knowledge of Ngsi v2 and Ngsi Ld. I'm noticing their differences. I guess that you have worked with Context Broker, any of them, and of course that you are familiar with JSON and partially with JSON Schema. And of course that you are familiar also with Git or GitHub front page. And of course, I guess that maybe is not very demanded that a code editor like Python. So is what we are going to use. Okay. First of all, I'd like you to share with me your GitHub users. And if I'm not wrong, yes, here, one moment. Yes, let me share this link in the chat. I guess that I can put into the chat. So if you want to do this, I strongly recommend you to just to write your GitHub user there, because if you are putting your GitHub user there, I will allow you to be authorized into the Incubator Repository, and therefore what you are going to do will be officially available there. Okay. If you don't have a GitHub user, this is the time for registering. Okay. And we are going to use the repository incubated. Okay, in this. So the end of this exercise is to submit a complete a full data model. Okay, and for doing so, we are going to be based in a data source which are official and they are pending of being created. Oh yes. And of course, I'm glad to receive any comments to the contribution manual that we are going to review. And if you are not capable of dealing with all the stuff that we have to do, then it can be completed afterwards. And if the submission is successful, you will get your first data model published by the end of the work. Okay. So first of all, we have reviewed the checklist for contribution, but now we are going actually to go for this. So let me go here, the contribution checklist. And then, okay, let's review the contribution manual. I guess that I could make a quick poll. So please, could you tell me, let me start vote. How many of you have seen the contribution manual? Please, could you start voting? So I guess that I've created a poll. Let me just, okay, okay. Keep on voting. Okay, so most of you have not. Okay. Okay. That's good enough. So I'll be slow enough for you. Okay. So you are seeing my screen right now. Okay. Oh, sorry. What you are seeing here is the same process that you have before. The only difference is that now the links to any element and what you have to do in every step is here. So you can click. If you click here, then it's open. Let me open in a new tab, and then happens is redirecting me to one of the resources. Okay, in this case we are going to copy. This is not wrong. This is what is expected. Okay, so you have all this contribution workflow. Okay, so let me insist. You have two elements which are mandatory and two elements which are voluntary, and the rest are generated automatically. So first, regarding the JSON schema, okay, this is here a recommendation about don't do this. We'll go for it later. Okay, first, the JSON schema is just, let me insist, validating the payload in key values. So first question is not going to validate your payload in normalized format. Okay, why are we doing that? Because the key values payload for NGSI v2 and NGSI LD are quite the same. Okay, and therefore we are validating both approaches with a single tool. Okay, as I've mentioned, in the coming future, we'll have something specific for NGSI v2 normalized and for NGSI LD normalized. Okay, here there are some recommendations. If you have a payload, there are some tools which create a JSON schema out of a payload. Payload is an example. Okay, and you can use it. Okay. And here you have a form to validate the payload against the schema, which is on the site. And this spreadsheet tool is also linked here because it's what we are going to use for the example. Okay, there is also a learning zone with some resources if you are not very familiar, and you have here just the guidelines. These guidelines I'm going to open quite quick. So these are recommendations for how to code your data model. So how the terms has to be written, the recommendation for reusing things, okay, not inventing the wheel, the validation, the data types that you have available, how you have to create the definitions, the numbers, what we are doing with units, how to code the percentage, so locations, and so on and so on. So there is not a big amount, okay? It's not a big amount, and it's quite updated. So yes, you have to review it, okay? The guidelines, okay? What else? In a JSON schema, and we are going for an actual example, we have is, let's say, the single source of truth. Therefore, let me go for one specific example of this JSON schema. Oh, here we are. Let me go for one of these examples. What is the quickest way? If we go here, yes, aircraft. Okay, I'm opening. This is the aircraft data model, and we have a schema here. Okay, what do we have here? We have just, maybe make it a bit bigger, will be easier to see. Okay, we have just the type. In this case, is an aircraft, and then you see that in every property at the first level there is a description. There is always a description, okay, but with one exception. And then in this description we have several terms here, and this is what we are seeing into the contribution manual. You see that the term property, a dot and a space. This is our separator. Our separator of the different elements is a dot and a space. Okay. So what we can have here. So we have to include if this attribute is a property, a relationship, or a geoproperty. Okay. All the elements will be separated by a dot and a space. Okay. And then you can include optionally if this attribute is following any model. If this attribute have units, this is only for documentation purposes. It's not going to be interacting with your with your application. So there is some other ways. In fact, in Ngsi LD, you have the unit code. Okay, you can use it, but this is only for documentation purposes. So it does not apply to you and is not going to interact with your data. Of course, you can have also the enumeration of the possible values, okay? And you can include also the privacy in the case that this attribute is going to store, let's say, privacy affected values. And of course, a mandatory description of more than 15 charts. So there is no limit. Okay, you can put as much as you want. You can include any dot and spaces as much as you want. So we don't, there's no limits there. So here you see an example. Property, in this case is a property, is following the model of a number. Okay, the units in this case is degrees centigrade. The privacy is low. Okay, I guess that it should be null, but in this case, just for the example purposes, and the enumeration is like this: temp1, temp1, which makes no sense for this example, but for showing an actual example, you can see temperature of the entity, a dot and a space, and then you have here. Okay. Let me go. Yeah. And this is our data model. And in this data model, we have plenty, everything is documented. Has to have the description at the first level. Okay. So we have the description. In this case, is a relationship. Okay. The relationships for compatibility reasons has to be always this way. Okay, because we have to be compatible between Ngsi V2 and Ngsi LD. So first one is for Ngsi V2, second is for Ngsi LD. Okay, and here we have the required properties. In this case, we strongly recommend to reduce to a minimum the amount of required properties. Okay. So we are into the second reviewing this. So there is a form for checking that everything is okay. We'll go for the in the front page. What is this form? Check your schema before contributing. Let's click here and see what happens. What we have here is just a form in which you have to include your email and your URL. What is this email for? It's just for providing you feedback. Because if you are testing this, I have no way of connecting you, then how I going to provide you with some support? Okay, and you can see here an example. I'm going to click directly and see what happens. Okay, what you got here is that we are reviewing every property in this data model, and it's telling you, oh, it's properly documented from the Ngsi point of view, and the description is also true. So this text, and we are also providing you with the text. By the end of the file is this schema has 23 properties, 2 properties are not described at all, and 0 have description that must be completed. Okay, so we have a pending issue. A pending issue is that for geolocated properties which are defined outside of our domain, we are not capable of documenting properly. Okay, but it's not a problem because it's also for these kind of properties which are quite clear what they are. Okay, and this part is explaining that these are the exceptions, and the other point is that $ref, which is the relative reference of a part of your JSON schema, is not possible unless the description of the property is included. So there's some explanations here. So this is not accepted because here in the destiny of this reference there is not a description, and therefore as long as we need a description, we have to do it this way, the accepted one, which is below. Okay, but once you have the description here at second levels, like in an array or in an object, it's not necessary. You can use $ref freely. Okay, this is the privacy, the 3 different levels which are defined. You can use it or not. It's something which is optional. And here is the tools for checking that we have reviewed. This is what we got. And now what we have here is an example of the payloads. So you can see an example. Okay, example for Ngsi V2 key values, default, Ngsi normalized, Ngsi LD key values, Ngsi LD normalized. And here is the contributors. This is the way that we are going to provide you credit to you. So let's see an example. Yes, this one. Let me open in a new tab. And this is how it looks like. So this is voluntary. The contribution agreement is not voluntary, it's compulsory. But if you want to be credited, this is the way. So you have your name, your mail, and all of the properties here are optional. So maybe you can put your project or not, your organization or not, your email or not, or your name or not. So, and then you appear here. The good point is that you appear here when there is going like any modification, we'll get in contact with you if you want to, let's say, show your opinion about the extension or the potential modification of the data models of this subject. Okay, what else? The adopters. So this is the way you can disseminate your project that is using a data model. Let's see an example. Oh, sorry. Stop. Okay, here we are. Oh, so what do I do? Sorry, here. Okay, so this is the adopter name, the description, the mail, if you belong to an organization, the previous comments, and all of them are also optional. Okay. And the rest of the automatically generated documentation you have here. I'm not going to get into the details. You can review it. And this is the way of contributing. And just a quick review about don't do this. Okay, so don't contribute not requested documents. So just the schema, the examples are mandatory, and optionally the adopters and the contributors. And that's all. Everything else that you are sending is useless. You are working for nothing, and we are not going to do anything with them. Okay. If you don't create new properties that are already general. Most of the data models have this reference which create all these properties. Do not reinvent it. Okay. Because if you are going to put a name into your data model, we are going to remove it and use this. Okay. Of course, there is some other properties which are available for inclusion. Don't reinvent these properties because they are already available. Go here. Okay, and don't do enumeration with numbers. Okay, so people is something between 0 and 3 and put a number. No, if it's an enumeration, you have to put the numbers 0, 1, these kind of things. Okay, and the percentage between 0 and 1, not 0 and 100, or maybe if it can exceed 1, so maybe the maximum amount, but it's not the number 100 just in terms of units. And don't try to send us schemas for validation, other things, and so on. Okay, let's go for the next point, which is we have reviewed the contribution. Okay, let me go. And I encourage you to visit all these sources. What are these sources? These are elements that we are going to put into the initiative, a Smart Data Models initiative, sooner or later. So if you are doing today, you will be credited for doing so. We are going to go for the organization. Okay, well, we'll do the example with this, but I like you to do it with any other of this. And here in this link, there is plenty of data models, of data sources that can become a data model. Okay. If you can do it with other data source, yes. Imagine that you are interested, let's say, in other domain like I don't know, manufacturing. Then you can do it as long as you have documented attributes. Is quite good that you don't invent the specification. Okay, it's better to have something which is already agreed. And that you have clearly stated the data types that you have for the attributes. So maybe if you don't know if the attributes is going to be a number, a string, and so on, maybe you are not mature enough for creating a data model. And of course, it is actually being used, because if not used, then we have a problem. In the case of schema.org, because of the power of the search engines, all these data models are used. Okay. And now we have done the step first, and we go for the second step. Okay, let me go for organization. Click here. Okay, this is our data model. Of course, the schema.org is, let's say, quite, I don't know how to describe, but there is hundreds of properties that you can include, and not always are all of them well defined or not ambiguously defined. Okay, so in this case we're going for just 3-4 properties of this data source, and we are going to make it a data model. So what is the next step? The next step is just where I'm going to use the we're going to create with a new with a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is for helping us on creating a JSON schema. If you are very familiar with JSON schema, it's not going to provide you any further any kind of additional value, but this could be not the case for most of the people. Let me go here to the main site. You see the option, draft the data model, and new template. Okay, and the system is asking us if we are going to create a new instance of this template for us for creating the data model. We can say so, make a copy, okay, and it will show us, okay, we have a new spreadsheet in which we have to provide all the properties, all the cells. We have to fill all the cells on blue. Okay. Here is the subject in which this data model will be located, the data model name, the title, so you can separate the terms of the data model. The data model has to be just one single word, and the global description. Okay, yeah. Okay, and here you can see very simple. In order to not waste our time, I've already done this. Yes. Let me show you just a quick. We go. Yes. So here. Moment. Yeah. I guess will be this. Imagine that I've copied. What I've done is just copying some of the elements of this data model, which are here in organization. Let me show you. What is an organization? An organization such as a school, NGO, corporation, club. Okay, this is the definition. Okay, if we are going to the spreadsheet, we see this definition here. An organization such as a school, NGO, corporation. It's just copying and pasting. Okay, and let's see, aggregate rating. If we are going here, aggregate rating, the overall rating based on a collection of reviews, rating, or item. Okay. Here we define as an object, and here is the description. This is the author, so the same way it's a relationship, so we don't have to care about the data type, the best rating, so on, so on. Okay, I've already done another thing, which is I've made this spreadsheet public, so anyone with the link can get access. Because once we have this, we can copy this link. Okay, go to the main site. No, here. It's coming. Yes, I click. Yes. Oh no, I haven't. And then go for this option with our spreadsheet, and here you have a form. You paste this URL, and then voila, if everything goes well, we don't have the demo effect, then you got as return a drafted data model. Okay, this way is nice to see. The raw version, yeah, it's not so nice, but it's complete. Okay, you can see the data model how it's being created out of this spreadsheet. Supposedly to this point, you don't need to know anything about JSON schema. Okay, for the next step, you really need a bit. Okay, so I don't think that it's possible with no knowledge of JSON schema to submit a complete data model. But if this is the case that you don't know, we can provide you with some support. Okay. So don't stop doing this because you are not an expert at JSON schema. Please get in contact with us and we'll see what can be done. Okay, so let's go for the next part. So we have validated, we have created this. I know that you are not seeing in full screen. Let me go for the next. Yeah. Then we see how to fill this spreadsheet. Okay, and this is what we got. What do we have to do after receiving this version of the data model? We have to include some additional elements which are not included, because if we include that, we make the spreadsheet quite complicated, and I don't think that is worth to be coded and so on. And then we can fix possible errors, provide more details and limits. What do I mean? Imagine that you have a number. If you have a number, maybe this number could be between 0 and 11, like the ultraviolet index. Okay, then you can put minimum and maximum. You can include the units. You can include the enumerations, the privacy, exactly, or by the end of the schema, the required properties. So this has to be done manually. I recommend you to do it in, let's say, in PyCharm. So, okay. Once we got it, we have to validate, and we have to make two validations. Okay. First validation is that it's compliant with JSON schema. Okay. And the second is that you have documented properly the properties. The validation of the JSON schema, this is an external tool, but I guess that is quite good. So it is so good that I don't want to just to reinvent anything, because it's good enough, and it's free, of course. Let me go for it. Yeah. Okay. And what is this resource doing? And of course, you can put here the code of your schema. I'm going to remove it, and this is the code of your payload, and then it's validating. Let's go for an actual example of the initiative. Let's go for here. I'm going to for the aircraft. Let me go. I have here. No, I don't remember. So when I don't know, if I want to go for a data model, the quickest way of doing so is just go here, aircraft. Okay. I'm opening. So you see the schema. Okay. Then imagine that this is the schema that you have created. I'm just copying. Copy. Where is the window that I want to show you? Or the window that I want to show you? I don't remember. Sorry, it's not here. Here we are. Okay, paste. Okay, first thing that this tool telling us, oh, this schema is right. Imagine that you missed a comma. Is telling you what is going on, and here there is a warning message. You are not capable of seeing because in Firefox is not working properly. So I strongly recommend you to use it in Chrome. In Chrome, you can see it perfectly. Okay. So any error that you can have, imagine that you put any kind of error here, then it's telling you. So it's quite good. And the next point is that, okay, just let me close some of the elements here. This is the schema, and now let's go for the examples. Remember, we only validate the key values. The key values are named example.json or example.json. Okay, let's go for this one. Hopefully, if everything goes well, copy, paste here. Okay, you can see. So it's validating. Imagine that we don't put the type, okay, which is a mandatory property. This tool is telling us, oh, you are missing this object, this part, okay, and everything. Imagine that you put the vertical speed as a string, so it's telling us, oh, I'm expecting a number, and you are putting here in a string. So it's quite a nice tool. And the next part of the validation, let me go for this very example, is the validation that is properly documented. Okay, and here we can see this example. Let me emphasize something. For validation, we have to validate just the raw version of you have. So you have to take the raw version like this, purely the code, and then we can go here, check your schema before contributing, this option, and then to paste this URL. I'm pasting here my email, and you have to check all this because we are keeping your email, and therefore we are affected by GDPR. And then if everything goes well, okay, this is the return. So it's saying go directly to the bottom, 20 properties, one is not described at all, which is location, which is the geo property, and 0 must be completed. So it's quite nice. It's telling you, oh, this data model is ready to be accepted. Okay, we have 10 minutes. Okay, but we are on it. Okay. Imagine that we have validated the examples, and then what's next? So in this case, there is a tool which can be useful, is for generating Ngsi Ld normalized payload. You can get out of the normalized example key values. It's quite simple, just by removing the parts which are not the values. Okay, I'm not going to explain here today. And the next point is that, yes, this is the validation, and then you have to fork the Incubator repository and to create a new pull request. So this new pull request, let me go to the Incubator repository. Here, as you can see here, there's 2 pull requests. So one is in actual one, and the second, this commit, I did it just for this exercise. And then what I did is just is something which is a bit crappy. I'm not submitting a complete data model, but we could submit here just all the files, the JSON schema and the examples here, and this appears to be here. Why I'm mentioning this? Because all these pull requests appear into the front side. In fact, if you create your pull request, you have to wait just 5 minutes. It's the maximum time of wait. And then you can see here, let me go in the right part in the bottom, there is an option called pull request and issues. And then you will appear here, as you see here, this is our pull request, the commit appears here. This is updated every 5 minutes. So if you make the pull request, the maximum time that you have to wait is 5 minutes. It's updated on 0 and 5 times. So if it's now 11:51, at 11:55 there will be a new review, and if there is a new pull request, it will appear here. Once it appears here, we'll be aware, and therefore will provide you with feedback sooner or later. So when I mean sooner or later, it used to be every week all of them are somehow answered. Some of them are just approved, and some of them are answered with further comments and these kind of things. Okay. And I guess that is mostly what I want to show you. With this, you get really your data model here, and it's only waiting for get approved. Okay. Just as a summary, so remember, our goal is to allow the real interoperability between Ngsi data sources. So let me emphasize that the context broker will allow you to do whatever you want. Even you can use our data models and extend it, add additional properties, and nothing happens. Okay, or just use part of the data model. It is not a problem. It is not a problem. What we encourage is that once you use any property, that this property and this data type will be the ones that are defined into the Smart Data Models Initiative in order to be actually interoperable. Okay. You can contribute always as long as you have a use case and you comply with the contribution manual and follow the contribution workflow. Okay. If you don't want to contribute and you just want to use it, there are some search tools for finding the right data model for you. And I really encourage you not to reinvent anything. If there is something around there is a regulation. What are the conditions for adopting a new regulation? This regulation has to be open and has to be adopted. If there is such conditions are met, then it will be very easy that we adopt it. And let me emphasize the differential advantages of this initiative of smart data models, which is we answer not in terms of months or years like in a classic standardization activity, more in the way of weeks. We do not invent anything, so the better we do not invent anything. So if there is something around there, we just go for the last details, but not much and not less. We struggle to make things easy for contribution. Of course, we have also to be quite consistent and to be in order to allow the automation of the activities, because with 500 data models and now we will get possibly 100 new ones. If we are not automating things get crappy in quite soon. We are emphasizing that we have a single source of truth. So this JSON schema that contains the descriptions are the single source of truth. So it helps us to be consistent and not to have, let's say, misalignments between what is written in the specification and the technical part. And we prefer to do the things simple and useful than technically correct and powerful. So we have some let's say suggestions. Oh, if you do this, this will be much more powerful. I don't want to mean that we don't care. As long as if they are powerful and it's used, it's okay. But first demonstrate that this power is really required by the market. So if this is the case, it's okay for us. So we have no any kind of prejudice, but we need something that has been useful, because there are many things that can be done, but we are doing the things one way, and this way has to be simple because there is a great potential of projects that can be using this. Okay. And now we have 5 minutes left, and I'm expecting you have any other questions or suggestions for this. Just quick vote. So I want to make a question. How many of you are willing to use the initiative? You can vote. I guess that I've launched a voting poll for you. Oh my God, there's okay. Okay, or any other questions? Let me go if there are questions. I'm not seeing other questions.
One thing to clarify, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, please.
It is as we explained in the very first session yesterday. Experiments are expected to be using data models that either are already defined in the Smart Data Models Initiative or are contributed to the initiative. That's the overall expectation. So definitely they should be using it.
Okay. So feel free to contact. Let me put here in the chat my email. Okay. Yes. Well,
but I want to
yes.
mention that people should conduct their requests for help or anything through the spaces we have created on I4Trust community, because otherwise we get lost and there might be questions that might be formulated by someone but useful for everyone. So it's better to answer than in the spaces we have created for that purpose. Since this is a technical topic and might be beyond let's say the scope of activities of DIH and even be useful for SMEs aiming at using the technology, the spaces you should use is the one named as I4Trust Help Desk. And so I suggest that is the one being used.
I don't have the link. I don't know, sir, if you have a...
well, anyone that has joined the community
okay,
can
they are
find
there. Okay. Any other question? We have 2 minutes.
I'm placing the link into the chat anyways to that space.
Yes. Okay. Let me show.
There were several questions, no? Or no? I thought they were. I thought there were, but apparently not.
I'm not seeing additional questions. Open. There are answered questions, but it was from the coming session. But no, there is something on the chat. Where will be the slides be uploaded? Okay.
That is something that will take place right after this session. So I don't know how long it will take, but in not in quite short time, and certainly along the day, it will be made available. And I understand, Rajit may correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that there will be a post on the DIH working group spaces with a bit summary and the link to the content, right?
Yes, so there will be post after each session for that day's recording and slides with links to those resources in the post. So you make sure that every day you can check, or you can anytime you want you can go back and look in the space. You will find that post in the history as well. But of course, it takes a little time for us to upload the recording and post everything. So for this session to the end of the day, you should have something.
Okay, I like to, if it's possible, to see if there is any specific interest in some of the domains that we have published. You can put into the chat. Smart destinations. Oh, nice. See, yes. There is. Let me just go quickly here. Oh yeah. So yeah, I'm just tourist. There is several data models for that. Yeah, which are based on. So there is a standard which is 178503, which is the semantic of smart destinations, and we have adopted several of these data models, and we come working on that. So here in the tourist destination, you have 3 which are compliant with this standard, and we keep on working on that. So you can go for just tourist destination. You have the specification here. Eventually, if you are willing, there is a translation. I haven't mentioned, but currently the 4 languages available, which is English, which is the official one. There is Spanish, okay, here. And there is also French, okay, and there is also German. German is some testing, but it seems to work nice, okay. So I guess that for Spanish and French you will find out always, but for German we haven't done the full translation of all the data models, just because we were just testing how good the German translation were, because it's just an automatic process. We are not doing manually. Okay, it's absolutely impossible to do it. So it's just launching a process, and that's all. Takes a while, costs a bit of money, but it's not a big deal. Other sector or that you are interested in? Assistive technologies. Oh my God. I know what you mean, but we are starting with health, okay? But possibly inside health, there will be some kind of thing. So there is a very good opportunity for creating the brand new one data models on that. So quite interesting. Another thing. So in fact, I haven't shown, but the smart health domain is already being created. But as long as we don't have any data model, it's not officially linked. But if I go, let's say, to our initiative, and we look for
there was a project, IoT large scale pilot, which name was Activate, that perhaps has defined some models associated to assisting living, particularly for elder people. I think we were going to contact them to see if there were models they wish to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a project, IoT large-scale pilot, in funded under the same call as it was iOS 2020 or Smart Synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
That one focus on elder people and support to elder.
Any other sector that you are interested in? Okay, if not, we have exceeded just 6 minutes what it was planned, and unless you, from the organizers part, I guess that we can say thank you very much for attending.
Yes, exactly. Thank you everyone so much for attending, and thank you Alberto and Jason for presenting. And yeah, tomorrow we continue with our technical sessions. I think we can close now. Have a nice day, everyone.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.